Howdy, you all.
How's everyone doing?
Morning. We can't check anything though. We can't check backgrounds because we can't turn the video on.
I've just been able to turn my video on now.
Okay. There we go.
So
Over 400 sign-ups. Pretty exciting.
yeah,
How are we feeling?
not bad.
Good.
Same pace?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's only us at the moment, though, isn't it?
Morning, kids.
So we're live. We've got 48 people already in the session. So that's good. Hello to everyone.
We're not going yet, are we, though?
But there's already 55 people listening in.
Watching.
Yep. Watching you,
Wow.
watching me, watching all of us.
Well, I think you
Hello,
should
everyone.
do a dance or something, Damo. Just a bit of an interpretive dance on the whole PEP11 issue to date.
That's your interpretive dance, Brendan. Seriously?
You finally found my strong points, Brendan. My interpretive dances.
You'd be the only one on here that doesn't care about not having their hairdressers open, wouldn't you, Brendan? The rest of us are all a bit like, seriously?
That's pretty rude.
It's not bothering me too much either.
I wasn't going to say anything, Damien. I don't know you well enough.
Michael, what are
leave
you
anyway,
using
Michael.
the council parks and gardens to do your hair by the look of it?
Yeah, you said it, my friend.
Yeah, no, I don't care. It's all there.
Good morning, Zali. How are you?
Morning, good, thank you.
Hey, Zarly. Didn't see you pop in there.
So I hear our local members not turning up.
No. Yes.
He's feeling a bit of heat.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week or two.
He has written to me saying that he thoroughly supports the, the objection to PEP11, et cetera, but I think there's other issues more pressing, which I can't speak to.
I think politicians can walk and chew gum at the same time, would be my response.
You would hope so. It's not anyway, I think he was satisfied with the bill that or the motion that he put, and that's where he sits.
You know that motion has fallen off the notice paper. So private members' business bills or motions can only sit on the notice paper for 8 weeks or 8 sitting Mondays. And after that, they fall off. And the only way they come back on is if the government calls them.
Right. Well, I think that's what he was suggesting would happen. And if it clearly hasn't.
And a motion doesn't stop it. So a bill can outlaw it. A motion just says, I call on the government to do X. So a motion doesn't physically do it.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, I think we are going to get started.
Sounds like we already had.
Yes, it does sound like we already had. I love this. Lots of good chat and debate going on. But I wanted to welcome everyone to Surfrider Foundation Australia's Stopping PEP11 Northern Beaches Community Town Hall. My name is Laura Wells, and while everyone gets settled in, I'm going to take you back to the beach to remind you of why we are here and the platform that this campaign is building on. With a little video that should be coming up any second now.
It's coming.
Oh, no sound. Oh.
Got a paddle out just about to happen. Hundreds of people have just come down to the beach. This thing is going to be huge. And they've come out in opposition to this catastrophic project that's been proposed off this coastline.
Not PEP11. It's just an absurd decision to consider drilling for oil and gas off one of the most populated, pristine coastlines in the world. Stop PEP11! In the event that something goes wrong, it'll be catastrophic. So let's just get this out of our backyard. Let the people in power know that we will not accept this.
We grew up on the northern beaches of Sydney, beautiful clear waters, and you don't really realise how beautiful these waters are until you've travelled the world and then come home and gone, man, we're living in one of the most beautiful areas in the whole world. We go to California quite a lot, and you get down to the beach and it surprised us at first because you think we had this image of Californian beaches being super beautiful, and they are, but you see oil rigs out on the horizon. It's a massive eyesore. See the turnout today with so many other functions going on around this area, like the WSL just up the coast, many other things going on. So many people gave this priority, which is our Mother Nature. We're giving Mother Nature priority. It's beautiful. They have beauty in their heart. This gave me just a very warm-hearted feeling to see people turn up for not just themselves, but for the next generation. They see beauty here. We came here and we lived here when such things are afoot, behind the scenes, behind our back. Let's get going. Let's support this. It's a beautiful coastline. Let's keep it that way.
All right, thanks, team. Now, as I said, my name is Laura Wells. I am on the board of directors for Surfrider Australia. And also, I am an environmentalist and campaigner, and I've been working to protect our oceans for a very long time. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Surfrider Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We are coming from all different areas today, and I would love for you to pop into the chat country that you are coming from. Today, I'm coming to you from Yuin country on South Coast, New South Wales. But we've got a great event planned for you today. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'm pleased to report we've had over 450 people who have signed up for this event today. It is absolutely incredible and just shows the spirit of people in the community that are really wanting to protect our oceans and our futures. So the overview for the program today we'll start with an introduction to PEP11 and Surfrider's campaign against it with our National Campaign Director, Damian Cole. We'll then hear from Bruce Robertson, who is an energy finance analyst with the Institute for Energy, Economic and Financial Analysis. Lane Beachley, 7 times world champion and Northern Beaches local. And we'll be hearing from a representative from Surfrider's Northern Beaches branch on what you can do to get involved with the campaign. And we'll be concluding with a panel discussion with federal member for Warringah, Zali Segul, and the founder and president of Living Ocean, Robbie Newman. Now, we are recording this event today and it will be available on the Surfrider website. And please feel free to drop in any questions you have into the chat and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible during our panel discussion. We also recommend selecting speaker view today. That way you will get the best experience. It's in the top right-hand corner of your screen. And now I'll hand over to Surfrider's National Campaign Director, Damian Cole, to run you through the campaign.
G'day everyone. Thank you for that, Laura. My name's Damian Cole, and before I do go on, I just want to acknowledge that I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm gathered here today, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation down here in southwest Victoria. And I just want to acknowledge and pay my respects to all elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that they do have a continuing connection to this land, this ocean community, and this entire planet. Now I'm going to share my screen. I've got a cool little presentation to get through, some slides so you don't have to keep just looking at me. So let me get into this. Okay, so so as I said, my name is Damian Cole, and I'm the National Campaign Director for Surfrider Foundation. And I got involved with Surfrider Foundation about 3 years ago during the Fight for the Bite, which we saw the very successful community movement that we saw across the country, which saw an accumulation of over 60 to 70 paddle outs across the country, and the mass opposition to that around the country. We saw that real energy that is essentially kind of ended up pushing Equinor out of the bite, and that was a really successful campaign for us. And as soon as that was won, we turned our attention, and unfortunately we saw something a lot closer to home, which was on the east coast of Australia, and which could potentially affect even more people. So I'll get into that, and that is called PEP11. So I'll just take you through a bit of an overview of what is PEP11. So I'll really kind of break that down, and then why it's happening and who's behind it, looking at the proponents and also the government, the political side of it, and then the risks and impacts to our east coast of Australia and our planet and our oceans. And then should be kind of going through our Stop PEP11 campaign so far, which has been a great show of, again, people power with local organisations who have been working tirelessly to ensure this stops. And then finally, and most importantly, what you can do as a community member, as a concerned community member who wants to protect their coastline. So I'll get into it. So what is PEP11? We hear this kind of number around there and this kind of name, and we're not always sure what it means. And quite simply, it stands for Petroleum Exploration Permit 11. And PEP11 is a permit to drill for oil and gas offshore between Manly and Newcastle. Now, the lease is quite substantial in size, with 4,576 square kilometres. So you can see that with the red outline there. It covers quite a huge part of our east coast here, which is equivalent to 83 Sydney harbours. So a lot of water in that. And in some parts, whilst obviously it's quite wide, in some parts PEP11 does come within 6 kilometres of the shoreline. So we're getting quite close to the most populated coastline in Australia. Now, what are they looking for? Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of focus on gas, which for various reasons. But looking at one of Advent Energy, who's one of the major proponents, their independent expert report, there's been some information that came out and evidence for Sydney Basin comparing favourably as a potential source for both oil and gas. So there is quite a strong likelihood that we could find oil out there as well. Now, to get into what we've been hearing a lot is that this is only one exploration well, and that's what we keep hearing. And if you look the second one down, it says Baleen there, which is the name of one of the areas on the seabed. And that's where they want to begin. They want to begin their exploration there. But if you look at that map, it does get quite confusing. I know there's a lot of lines there and a lot of different things going on. But the most important things are those big red patches. Now, the red patches show that that's where they think there's a lot of gas. And they're looking at around 3 trillion cubic feet of gas in this whole area. So once you start exploring in one area, then the exploration wells tend to expand out. So 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 6, 10, who knows where this could go. So there is evidence of oil and gas anywhere between Newcastle and Sydney. Now, the overview. So to give you a quick rundown of who holds the title for this. So we've got the PEP11 license down the bottom. The majority shareholder is Asset Energy, which is actually owned 100% by Advent Energy. So this can get a little confusing because there's a lot of different companies that jump around, and there's a lot to take in, but we've simplified it to a point that Advent Energy is then owned by MEC Resources and BPH Energy, who are the funders. They're the ones that are putting the money into the exploration. And then on the other side, we've got Bounty Oil and Gas, who owns 15% of the PEP11 license. So what's the politics behind this? Well, so far, over the last 18 months, we've had the New South Wales government come out and formally oppose it. The Federal Labor Party came out and formally opposed it in February this year. Every single MP from Bondi to Newcastle has opposed it. That's seven MPs in the directly impacted area. We've had Prime Minister Scott Morrison come out and oppose it as well a few months back. So every politician who has spoken on this issue has opposed it. So the big question is, why is PEP11 still alive? And the answer is Federal Resources Minister Keith Pitt. Now, the Minister Keith Pitt is the person that has the final say in whether this does go ahead or not. And whilst we've been hearing recently that this is dead in the water, that it will never go ahead, Keith Pitt has been quoted in saying that he will not be rushed into making a decision. So he's the one who up until now has always had the final decision. And this is part of the government's gas-led recovery, which Mr. Keith Pitt is quite a strong advocate for. So we're looking back at the PEP11 permit, which was set to expire in February this year, so that's over 6 months ago. But Asset, the major proponent, applied for an extension and also a change of permit title. So at the moment, the way the permit had been sitting was that it was for seismic testing only, and they're asking for an extension of this lease, and they want to change the permit title to exploration so that it allows for them to drill. Now, the extension that they got was earlier this year, which they got under the federal government's COVID-19 work bid exploration permit scheme, which forms part of the government's gas-led recovery agenda, which is something that came out last year quite early on in the global pandemic. Now, we look at why this gas-led recovery is happening, and I know that Bruce Robertson will go into this a little bit more in depth. But the simple thing is that our country is awash with gas. We have got, if you look in the top left, these are all the current licenses and projects going on around the country. So there is no shortage at the moment of gas or any fossil fuels at the moment. And quite the opposite. Australia is the single biggest exporter of gas in the world, and we export over 70% of our gas that's found in Australian waters or in Australian land. But even though that is the case, for some unknown reason, the east coast of Australia pays the 7th highest gas prices in the world. I'm not sure where that connection or where the breakdown is there. You would have thought that we'd be getting a lot cheaper prices, which Western Australia actually does have over in the west. We actually on the East Coast pay more than twice the amount for gas than Western Australia, who have a state policy which reserves gas for domestic use. So when we hear about gas shortages and that this is to secure the domestic gas market, well, looking by that map and looking at the fact that we're the single biggest exporter of gas in the world, doesn't really make sense. So what are the risks of PEP11? And what are going to be the impacts if this does go ahead? Well, there's no shortage of it, and this could be disastrous for our New South Wales coastal economies, our environment, our local communities, our planet, our oceans, and obviously our climate. But let's get started with the economy side of things. Now, the economy is based largely between that Sydney and Newcastle region. We are very largely based around tourism, around hospitality, around events and fishing. And that's a combined $11 billion to the local economies. And that is huge. And if you think of it, all those people that you know who may work for the restaurants and cafes on the Esplanade, that may work for learn to surf things or fishing charters or things like that. Those people, those everyday community members are those who would be highly affected and may be impacted economically. And the Sydney beach access alone is worth $1.2 billion per year. People coming down to the beach, that comes from the Deloitte Institute report. So moving across to the environment. Obviously, this would have huge impacts to our environments in Sydney, not only Sydney up to all the way to Newcastle, but Australia. We pride ourselves on having such a beautiful coastline, pristine waters. This is why people come to Australia and why we always have developed a culture around our oceans. And the coastline from Manly to Newcastle is, or the entire East Coast for that matter, is a huge whale migration superhighway, one of the biggest whale migration routes in the world. Now, looking closer to home for all of you Northern Beaches people, Manly Beach is home to an endangered colony of little penguins, which is estimated to be there might only be around 50 to 60 left. So they're endangered, and having something like this happen would severely impact the likelihood of their survival. And obviously, overall, drilling will just disrupt marine habitats, migrations, and fish. The operational leaks are commonplace in all of these projects, things that aren't necessarily reported in the news. They're just day-to-day use, day-to-day leaks. So this, even if there were no oil spill, if best case scenario, the industrialisation of the New South Wales coast doesn't incur an oil spill, you would still have the everyday operational activities that would be negatively impacting your entire East Coast. And then obviously the climate. Now, we've just seen through the IPCC report that we're not looking too good. We're in a lot of trouble around the world, and we need to start taking some serious action now. And whilst gas has been touted as a transition fuel, it's simply not. Gas is a harmful fossil fuel. It's a pollutant that's primarily made up of methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas, that is known to be up to 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Although the longevity of carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere longer, methane can stay up there for anywhere between 2 to 8 years, which then creates, by burning this gas and all fossil fuels for that matter, it thickens that pollution blanket around the earth, and it traps the heat, which then traps the heat in and makes our climate change worse, affecting all of our different weather systems. And then finally, our community. Now, this for all of us as Australians, I think that we have based our communities largely around our oceans and our coastal lifestyles. And that is something which healthy oceans nurture healthy communities. And we've seen that time and time again all around Australia. Our love for that ocean is just unprecedented. It's one of the, I think we've got probably some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. And this coastline, as I said, is home to almost 6 million people between Sydney to Newcastle, the most populated coastline in Australia. And it has the most to lose from PEP11, because millions of people who do rely on that healthy ocean for their mental health, for their well-being, for their physical health, it's part of our everyday life. And all of this is being jeopardised from the prospect of oil and gas drilling off the coast of Sydney and Newcastle. Now, let's get to the fun part, where our campaign so far, the Stop PEP11 campaign, and this has been in large part to community power. We've seen this, community groups, individuals, and the broader community have stepped up and said, no, they do not want this to happen. Not in their backyard, not on their coastline. This is something that must be stopped. And we've been working with, here at Surfrider Foundation, we've been working with Surfers for Climate and Living Ocean quite closely on this. And obviously the incredible work that Save Our Coast have been doing. Save Our Coast were the initial organisation led by Natasha Dean up in Newcastle, who brought this to our attention. And they've done some incredible work with amassing over 86,000 signatures in multiple petitions. They've done so much incredible work, and we'll be hearing from one of their local representatives soon. So a huge shout out to Save Our Coast for doing some incredible work, and also to Living Ocean for the amount of scientific work that they've done, making sure that we have that right scientific evidence to push through to stop this. So in came Surfrider Foundation, and we had a little bit of fun with it. So we got riggy with it. We made these AR filters with Instagram. We had these little cardboard cutouts, and we really wanted to make it so that it was an interactive thing for our communities, to give them perspective that this could be a reality. We then took a delegation to Canberra late last year in December, which was in conjunction with Save Our Coast as well. On the right, you'll see there that we went for a little paddle out in Lake Burley Griffin, which I would not recommend in the slightest. That just shows the testament to what we do as organisations to protect our coastline. I can tell you firsthand experience, we could not see our knees just sitting on our boards there. So, but yeah, huge shout out to everyone who came out and came down to support us. And what we did there as well, we went into Parliament, we spoke to different politicians, and we held a press conference, and that kind of lobbying actually really worked. It was advocacy for our coastline, and that actually eventually saw the Labor Party come out and formally oppose it from a federal standpoint. And then we had earlier this year, between March and May, we had our Paddle Out series, which saw us starting on your beautiful northern beaches in Mona Vale. You can see Tom Carroll there. And again, on the fake oil rig. We hope that's the only rig that we ever see out there. And that really generated the support for our cause across the community, all through the northern beaches. The Central Coast was our stop number 2 into Newcastle. And then we actually finished up in Byron Bay to really make sure that we expose this project and this issue to make it a national issue. So this is a beautiful photo showing the sheer amount of people at Terrigal on the Central Coast that have come out in opposition to this. And this is where we really gained a lot of momentum from people who just had simply no idea that PEP11 was even a threat. And this has been our biggest issue, is just getting the word out there. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. So our important thing here, and we'll just be talking about this right now, is what you can do. So you've seen all the work that we've been doing, that all of our organisations have been doing, and what can you do? Well, thankfully, we've had, which we'll be hearing from Zali Steggles a little bit later, she's come out with a bill, the Stopping PEP11 bill, which is just huge news for all of us who have been working tirelessly on this. And it gives us a chance and an opportunity to end this once and for all. And it empowers all of those MPs who have come out in opposition, whether it be Liberal, Labor, Greens, Independents. It empowers them to make the decision for their community, for you, the community member. So we really urge you to please sign and share our petition, which we've just had go live on our website. Also, please write to your local MP and let them know how you feel. Now, these ones can sometimes be a little bit, they can feel a bit intimidating, writing a letter to an MP, but I can tell you now, it doesn't have to be some scientifically written or engineering. You don't have to have an engineering degree for this. You just simply need to have it come from the heart. Tell them why you love your coast. Tell them why you don't want this to happen. And it doesn't need to be 3 pages long. A few sentences just telling them how you feel is what really counts. And then finally, join us at Surfrider Foundation and donate to our Stop PEP11 campaign. We've been, as I say, working tirelessly, and we love what we do, and we want to keep protecting our coastline, and we want to keep protecting your livelihoods. But we can't do that without the support of our communities. And there's probably one more that I mentioned just a little bit earlier that I haven't put in here, which is share the news, raise the awareness around your groups of friends, your family. Let people know what's going on, because for some reason, this thing is not catching on in the mainstream. It's taken a lot to get there, and we really need our communities to step up now and spread that awareness and make sure that this is the #1 topic around our environment and our coastline today.
Thanks, Damo.
All from me.
Thank you, Damo. That's awesome. It's so great to see all these community groups working together to really push PEP11. And there's lots of ways to, as Damo has said, to empower yourselves and really make a difference. So I'm going to move on to Bruce Robertson now. Bruce is an energy finance analyst with the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. And he's going to talk to us about the insanity of the government's gas-led recovery policy and why it's actually enabling projects like PEP11 all around Australia. Over to you, Bruce.
Well, good day to you all. I should declare up front that I have an interest in PEP11 because I surf and I love the coast. All the way up the coast. I live on the mid-north coast and in Manly, so I'm a local resident. So I definitely have an interest in the outcome for PEP11. I've entitled my talk today, Feeding the Beast, and the beast is Australian gas exports. So if we just move on to the next slide, which seems to be... look, 70% of all gas produced on the east coast of Australia is exported. So when they say this is for the domestic market, essentially they're lying. So while the world is rushing away from fossil fuels, our government has a gas-fired recovery. And we're seeing the greatest expansion of the industry in my lifetime. We're seeing new offshore permits being granted all around the country. We're seeing new large acreages of new onshore permits being granted. We're seeing new basins being opened up in every state and territory, with the exception of the ACT, which is a little bit small, really. The International Agency has stated that no new natural gas fields are needed. Full stop. We don't need them beyond those already under development. And yet here we are opening up more and more. Obviously, we can't get to net zero emissions by 2050 if we open up new gas fields like PEP11. We cannot get there. It is not possible to get to net zero emissions by 2050 if PEP11 goes ahead. Our customers are running away from gas, and this really is the key point. We must have customers if we're going to embark on a gas-fired recovery. And put simply, we don't. Japan announced its power plan recently to 2030, so that's only 8.5 years away. It's calling for a doubling of renewable energy and a halving of LNG in the power system. Now, LNG is not only used in power, it's also used to heat homes and cook with and industrial applications in Japan, but it means that their entire LNG imports will decline by 1/3. 1/3 of the world's largest importing market for LNG is going to disappear by 2030. After a COVID-19 inspired slump in 2019, demand in the USA is going to see further declines in 2021 and 2022. And domestically, we're seeing gas wind its way out of the energy system. And that's the key point. Look, if we have a look at what's happening in Europe and in the US and in Japan and in Asia, we are going to see carbon border adjustment mechanisms, which are essentially carbon taxes levied by foreign governments on Australia. Because we're so recalcitrant when it comes to climate, we're not doing our bit, and we're going to get held to account in a financial sense. Essentially, the gas industry is an appalling payer of tax. It does garner some royalties for offshore projects. For onshore projects, the royalties make gas a loss-making business for governments. They spend more money administering, picking up liabilities than they do make in royalties for onshore gas. And here we have just a representation of the offshore wells going around Australia. And you can see really they're concentrated on what's known as the Northwest Shelf up in the northwest of WA. The Bass Strait has historically been a big oil and gas producer. It's now mainly a gas producer, and it is now declining. And then we have PEP11 stuck up there off Sydney. There's only been one well drilled there, which was drilled in 2010, and there was no oil and gas discovered with that well, but they're looking to drill another one. We've been through Japan. Look, I think also we should just have a look at what's happening with our competitors. Qatar is the world's second largest exporter of LNG. Up until very recently, it was the largest. So it's a very similar size to Australia in terms of LNG exports. And it's looking to increase its production by 64%. Qatar is the world's lowest cost producer by a considerable margin. And it's a low cost producer because basically they're pretty good at producing gas for a start. They're pretty good at what they do, and we have to acknowledge that. They have a phenomenal resource that's located close to the coast in shallow water, which makes it very cheap to produce. And they're cutting prices to gain new contracts. So, you know, Australia is looking to increase its gas production at the very same time as Qatar is looking at this massive expansion in its gas production. At the very same time, our major market is running away from gas. Just to let people know, domestic consumption in Australia is falling. It's down 23% since 2014. And importantly, the makeup of it is really important. What we're seeing is residential and commercial usage has gone up since 2014. We're seeing industrial consumption has fallen, and really it's flatlined until the next plant closes, basically. They will close. Basically, we're seeing a deindustrialisation of Australia due to the exorbitant gas prices that we pay in Australia. And it's a slow process, and you will see that industrial production step down, much as it did between 2014 and 2017. You'll see it step down again sometime in the next 12 to 24 months as these plants have to reinvest more capital. You'll suddenly see some close, and that will step down. The surprising one here is what our government always bangs on about is we need gas to firm up renewables. Well, it's absolute rubbish. When you have a look at what's actually occurred, gas usage in gas-powered generation is down 67% since 2014. 67%. Now, renewables have gone from virtually nothing to about 30% of our national electricity market in that time. Gas is simply too expensive to run, except for in gas peaking plants. And gas peaking plants don't use a lot of gas. And they don't use a lot of gas because they're not switched on very often. They're very inefficient gas peaking plants. They're very high greenhouse gas emitters, but they're not switched on very often. So moving right forward, if we have a look, the Victorian government is being quite innovative at the moment. It's looking at trying to get its population off gas by improving efficiency of buildings and by using reverse cycle air conditioners to heat and cool your home rather than gas-fired boilers. It's cheaper to do this. If you have gas on your home at the moment, it's cheaper to heat your home with electricity and a reverse cycle air conditioner. It's cheap. It's more efficient to cook with modern induction stoves, and it's it's more efficient to heat your water with a heat pump. So I encourage anyone who's on gas out there to get off gas. It's only a little action that you can take for yourself, but it'll make you feel better and make the planet feel better too. Look, gas really is not a transition fuel. The Australian Energy Market Operator, which is the only body that has actually modelled the national electricity market and how to look at this properly, it sees a smaller role for gas in the future in a renewables rich grid in its integrated system plan. So this idea of gas as a transition fuel simply isn't true in fact, as showed you the gas consumption figures, and it's not true in theory. Look, Australian gas is just too expensive. Out of 54 countries surveyed, if we have a look, Australia on average was 12th most expensive market. But when you divide the market up into the east and west coast, because in Western Australia, they have a domestic gas reservation policy and gas is cheap in WA. On the east coast of Australia, it is exorbitantly expensive. It's a similar price to those of our customers, which is an absurd situation, as it is very expensive to liquefy gas and it's very expensive to ship gas in the specialised ships that you need. So we're over if we compare to similar big exporters like Qatar and the USA, we're 5.5 times the prices of gas in Qatar. It's over 3 times the price of gas in the USA, nearly 5 times the price of gas in the Russian Federation. Gas prices on the East Coast are not within a bull's roar of being internationally competitive. They're not even vaguely close to being internationally competitive. We are essentially getting ripped off by our gas producers. There are a small number of them on the East Coast. They control the price and they set it above international prices, well above international prices. And our government allows this to occur. The ACCC has a never-ending gas inquiry into gas prices, and essentially it always comes to the same conclusion that they're too expensive and we pay too much. It is a never-ending inquiry. Most price inquiries the ACCC embark on, it lasts for 12 or a long one, maybe 18 months. This one's been going since 2015 and there is no end in sight, because the government is taking no action to address the problem of high gas prices in Australia. The good news, battery cost deflation is faster than either solar or wind, which we've seen massive drops in price. So these renewable sources are cost competitive now with fossil fuel generation. They're cheaper and they're being adopted. That's the good news. We're seeing massive, in the light blue things here, you see the massive amount of investment going into solar, wind and battery storage. Unfortunately, we've got a government that is heavily subsidising gas power plants. Tallawarra B got 78 million from the New South Wales government and 5 million from the federal government. 21% of the entire project's value was your money. Snowy Hydro is building with your money the Curry $610 million gas plant. That $610 million figure is way too low. It'll be closer to $900 to $1 billion by the time pipelines are built and various other infrastructure that project needs. Twiggy Forrest, a man who is one of Australia's richest men, he's copping $30 million in subsidies from the federal government for his plant down in Wollongong. I wouldn't have thought he really needed any government money, but anyway, moving right along. On the emissions front, just very briefly, the key point is that global methane emissions, which is the main component of natural gas, are growing very strongly. To reach Paris, we can't have emissions growing strongly. We actually have to flatten them and finally bring them down. Current policy in Australia is to accelerate the rate of methane growth globally. We're a global player in this industry. We can't run away from it. It's our fault, that graph. A large part of that graph is our fault. So that's what we're doing. We're not this rubbish that, somehow or other we've got some climate commitments and that we're doing our best. is not in line with the science. Look, I think that's probably fixed it all up for me. I think that it's about it for me. I would encourage you to write to your local member. I would encourage, if you've got gas in your home, to get off the gas. And I would encourage you to continue to campaign to stop PEP11. The longer this goes on for, the more likely that the minister will approve it. So we need to raise our voices right now, as this forum is trying to do, and we need to get out there and tell our politicians that it's unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. That is a perfect little wrap up of your talk there to empower everyone with what they can do. I'm going to flick on over now to Lane Beachley, who obviously needs no introduction, 7 times world surfing champion, Northern Beaches local, and also an impassioned environmentalist looking out to conserve our oceans. Thanks, Lane.
Thank you, Laura. Wow. This is something I'm extremely honoured to be a part of and passionate about, and I'm really grateful for the likes of the Surfrider Foundation and Damian Cole and all the people who are actively getting involved with this campaign. There's an aspect of me that just feels so saddened by what's currently happening in our environment. I feel, look, at the end of the day, we are nature, and what we do to nature, we do to ourselves. And it's heartbreaking to think that, you know, having seen Bruce's presentation there, and to see that we still rely on our governments who are giving us a whole lot of coercion and false leadership to believe that gas is going to rebuild this economy is just utmost lies. And it's heartbreaking to think that we don't take enough proactive action to do something about it. But fortunately, you've all shown up here today and you're willing to step in, lean in and do something about it, because at the end of the day, our voice does matter. There's also a part of me that says, you know what, let's just give them the license. Let's just screw up our environment and let's just allow nature to wipe us out, because we're a parasitic species. You know, who else comes in and wants to destroy their own home and think that they're going to survive throughout that process? But of course, that's not why we're here. We're here because we believe that we can make a difference. And my shirt is almost, you know, it's a bit environmental, only because this is what the bottom of my feet look like when I came out of the water in Huntington Beach for many years when I was surfing there through the 90s. Oils, I mean, their whole coastline was littered in oil rigs, and of course little oil spills would happen all the time, but they always went under the radar. No one knew anything about it, and before you know it, you're walking around with oil droplets on the bottom of my feet, and when I'm going out to compete, I'd have to take off my leg rope and try and scratch all the oil off the bottom of my feet to ensure that I didn't slip off my wax. So look, this is a completely unacceptable thing. It's obvious that we don't need it. We produce enough gas. So I just wanted to lend my voice and my position and also my love of nature and my love of ocean to realize that we can make a difference if we want to. It just comes down to having the confidence to stand up and fight for what we believe in, because if we don't fight for it, it will go, it will be destroyed, and then we're destroying the environment for our future generations. And that, to me, I just cannot accept, and I will not allow that to happen on my watch. So thank you to Surfrider, thank you Damian, thank you to everyone who's, thank you to Zali for proposing this bill. I'm devastated to see that there's certain people within the government who believe that this is a waste of time and a waste of space and a waste of energy. And obviously, thank you, Bruce, for what you've just shared. Obviously, it is not a waste of time. And they're just telling us to, what? Shut up, sit down, be quiet, get over it. That's unacceptable. So thank you for this platform, and please keep fighting, keep writing, and keep speaking up and showing up. So, and don't give up on the environment.
Thank you, Lane. Wise words from a woman who has done so much to influence for good for our oceans. Next, we are going to be talking to Brendan Donoghue from Surfrider Northern Beaches branch, and Kristen Glanville from Save Our Coast, another community group, as Damo had mentioned before, that has been working hard to stop this project for a number of years. They're going to tell us what we can do at a local level to make sure we never see oil and gas rigs off our coast. Brendan, I'm going to throw over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Haven't seen you since that fateful day in Canberra, which I got to say, was not as cold as I thought it would be, but a lot murkier, which I think pretty much sums up Canberra. And with that, I'd like to thank Zali for trying to clear this thing up for us a bit. Look, Surfrider Northern Beaches branch is in the Gamarragal, the Garigal and the Carrigal country. And we acknowledge their love and care for this land and ocean that we are doing our best to keep going. We've been in existence since 1991, one of the original branches founded by Tom Kersop. And we've been meeting continuously for 30 years this year, which is a real achievement for a local organisation. We've been involved in everything from sewerage to sand nourishment to stopping the overdevelopment of surf clubs, cafes, public parks. We've run concerts. We've celebrated International Surfing Day. We've protected or tried to protect the little penguins. That was our first ever paddle out, in fact. Shark nets has been a major issue. Shells, the protection of pretty much anything to do with the beach, you name it, we've been involved. We're a one-stop shop. If you're a surfer, there's a difference between, we've always thought it's a difference between a surfer and a person who can surf. A surfer loves what they're doing, and there's plenty of athletic people who can surf. They don't get involved. There's a difference between a beach lover and someone who goes to the beach. And Surfrider attracts that spiritual side of the whole beach culture. And we try and celebrate it and protect it. I'd like to thank this panel of obviously very high profile experts in their fields. Surfrider has always been able to attract this. As we've gone on, we realise that surfing is mainstream now. There are people in every aspect of life that surf and love surfing. So if you've got an issue that you want to get attended to, if you have a skill but you don't have an issue, we can use that skill. We can use pretty much anything you can offer. But what we need is shoulders to the wheel. This is not a spectator sport. And as much as I want to thank this task force and this panel and this committee, I really want to acknowledge the local committee that has met for years and years and years, because this committee wouldn't exist, this presentation wouldn't exist except for their hard work. So to the Northern Beaches Surfrider Committee, well done. If you want to get involved with this, we'd love you to get involved. We're on the website, have a look for Northern Beaches, contact me direct, but join Surfrider, donate to Surfrider, get involved. It's not a spectator sport.
Legend. Thank you, Brendan. And that was a gross day down in Canberra, that murky water. But hey, we were all out there doing our bit, and Northern Beaches Surfrider have done an amazing job. So thank you very much for all your hard work. Kristen from Save Our Coast, let's jump over to you.
Thanks. So my name's Kristen Glanville. I'm the Northern Beaches rep from Save Our Coast. I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional owners of the lands we meet. For those of us in the Northern Beaches, that's Guringai, Garigal, Camarragal people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that the relationship between Australians and the coast began with our First Nations people, the Aboriginal people, canoeing and fishing in the waters. And that relationship is a continuous one that we continue to this day, where we appreciate the ocean for its beauty, its wildlife, and our ability to play and have recreation in it. Save Our Coast is a grassroots community campaign which first started in Newcastle in February 2018. Since then, it's had over 10,000 conversations between Newcastle down to Manly to talk about this proposed project. And almost unanimously, the community is shocked that such a project could happen so close to home and the impacts it could have on marine life, tourism, and our way of life. I joined Save Our Coast in 2019 as I was shocked to learn that so close to home we could have an environmental disaster like Deepwater Horizon with petroleum contamination leaching into our coastal waters. I was shocked that the developer proposed to carry out completely lawful seismic testing to map the ocean floor, which is known to kill and disorient marine creatures which rely on sound for navigation and finding food. Along the way, Save Our Coast and our allies have had some wins in the campaign. The developer of PEP11 has ruled out seismic testing due to the pressure put on by the community. A number of MPs from across the party spectrum have, at least in principle, come on board to oppose the project and listen to the voices of the community. And what we've been able to achieve so far is because of the work and support done by the community and by our allies, including Surfrider, who've organised this town hall, and support from MPs like Zali Steggall, who presented our petition to Parliament, which had over 86,000 signatures. As we've heard today, the fight's not over. While PEP11 expired 6 months ago, there's still a pending application by the developer for an extension. The developer has been tendering for contractors to carry out works despite PEP11 having lapsed. So as a community, we're left in limbo to know whether or not this project will go ahead, and even if it lapses, whether a new application could be made in the future for works to happen in the same location. Save Our Coast calls on the Minister to refuse the extension application, but we also call upon the many MPs who've expressed opposition to PEP11 to get on board and vote in favour of the bill that's being proposed by Zali Steggall. We need more than just words of support. We actually need action where it counts, and this bill could end PEP11 for now and forever. For those of you who, this is, if you're new to the campaign, we strongly encourage people to write to their MPs. If you're joining us from Warringah, then that's an easy task of go Zali. If you're in another electorate, now's a perfect time to write to your MP and tell them that you expect them to support this bill. You can also write to our state senators. Each state has, I think, offhand 6 senators. Write to them and tell them to put pressure on their lower house colleagues to vote for this bill. It's originating in the lower house, but senators can talk to their colleagues. And finally, write to Keith Pitt's office. He can end PEP11 now if he refuses the application to extend it. So to basically wrap up, we have to stop PEP11. We have to save our coast for now and the future and defend coastal wildlife and marine animals that can't defend themselves, and future generations that rely on us to be good stewards. I'll stick a link to Save Our Coast website if you're looking for tips on writing to MPs. There's some words that you can copy paste if you're looking for content. Otherwise, it's been a great presentation so far, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our other speakers.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and thanks to all of the hard work that Save Our Coast have been doing and to bring this to the attention of everyone. Now, we do have Michael Regan, the Mayor for the Northern Beaches Council, with us today. He actually has another engagement to run off to, so I just want to get Michael quickly before he has to leave. And Michael, where does the Northern Beaches Council stand on this project?
Thanks for that intro, and can I just quickly start by acknowledging the traditional custodians as well in the land, and just express my gratitude that we share the land today, and my sorry for the cost of that sharing. And I hope that in the spirit of reconciliation we do move forward to a place of justice, healing and partnership as we gently walk on this land. And let's just be honest, this is not walking gently on the land, what's being proposed. So well done to all the speakers so far, great messages. I like that one too, getting off the gas, that was a particularly good one. Council back in March last year, Northern Beaches Council back in March last year passed a resolution to oppose this, and right to the various federal members and state members. We actually supported the state Liberal government on their stance, who also opposed it. They were very quick to oppose this as well and call on the federal government to oppose it. We wrote to Zali and to Jason, and Zali has now put the bill up, and she'll talk to you hopefully about what's really important about her bill and why it should have been done by the federal government, and why Jason our federal member should have done more. And she'll explain why there's no excuses for that. My message is, and we voted on this again as an urgency motion back in October of last year as well, because it was, I think, becoming time critical at that particular point, that it was the decision and the reports were back with the government as way back then, and we again opposed it. Again, some of our Liberal councillors, Rory Amon and Dave Walton, all opposed, voted against it. So when we're talking about advocacy, you need to write and call out those local councillors, those local state members, if they're supporting of this or being silent on it. silence is deafening, and you need to call it out. And you just need to be very honest and raw and say, that's an appalling lack of judgment on your behalf. You need to support your local community. This is unacceptable. And by and large, politicians do listen. Your council is supporting you. We've written and we're working with Newcastle Council, Port Stephens Council, Lake Macquarie Council, and Central Coast Councils, supporting this being abolished. And if any other councils were doing something active in this space, we would be working with them as well. But this is very much Newcastle to Bondi, I think it was we were talking about. So, and it is a mixture of political colours. This is above politics. This is just a no-brainer. Get on with it, and council's been very strong in supporting that. So get on board, show your support for Zali's bill, in my humble opinion, and call out the others who are doing nothing, like Jason, like Scott Morrison and co. And that's me being a little bit political, but it's too late. It's honest. We've got to get this off the table. So thank you for everyone for giving the time up today to listen. And I encourage you all to write to us and act and get a positive response, and just keep writing and don't take no for an answer, essentially. So on that, I'll be short and sharp. So thank you, and well done for putting this on, and thank you all for your efforts. I can't say that enough, because it is a big, massive team effort, and we need to keep highlighting this in the media. So well done all.
Thank you, Michael. That was great. It's so positive to see people working within Parliament and Council that really are supporting this. And as you said, the silence has been deafening from a few people there. And we're going to throw to our panel conversation now. So we'll be joined by Damian, Bruce and Lane, and also Zali Stegel. And Robbie Newman from Living Ocean. We did invite Jason Folinsky, the representative for the federal seat of Mackellar on the Northern Beaches, but he has declined the invitation. And while we're on the topic from Michael, Damo, I'm going to throw over to you briefly. What actually did Jason say when he declined the offer?
So he said that he was hoping to make it on the day, but he's focusing on the COVID kind of lockdowns at the moment, and he felt that to him was the priority for the moment being. So that's pretty much what he said.
All right, fair enough. We've had quite a few people asking that question, so it's good to know where Jason stands on this issue. Now, what I want to do is go straight to Zali, because Zali, you have announced that you will be introducing a bill to ban PEP11. We've heard a lot of people refer to it. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yes, thank you. And congratulations everyone for a fantastic presentation, and for everyone to be here engaged. It's really important that the local community is involved. If I could pay my respects, of course, to our Indigenous elders, past, present and emerging. And I think Australia, with the longest continuous living culture, 60,000 years, it is only in our recent past and history that we are maybe having such a great impact on the earth. And I think we can learn a lot from our Indigenous culture and how we can walk much lighter on the earth and on our land and waters. The bill is ultimately, I guess it's a frustration, and it's trying to put an end to this. I've got to say thank you to Natasha Dean of Save Our Coast. She first brought the petition to me in February 2020, and I presented it to Parliament. I spoke on it. I've written at state level and federal level, and definitely welcomed the state government's declining the application to extend and vary the licence. I've asked the Prime Minister in question time, and I have met with Keith Pitt. And that meeting was incredibly frustrating, because he is incredibly focused on extending fossil fuels and gas exploration around the country. He really has no sense of the need for us to transition away from fossil fuels, and he is looking to increase our reliance on fossil fuels. That is his number one goal. And so he, I think as a Queensland MP, is very much looks at the coastline and the rest of Australia as that he's quite willing to open it up. And we've seen that he's opened up huge acreage around the 12 Apostles and around the whole coastline. So he is looking to expand gas exploration and is refusing to rule it out. So the bill essentially overrules the minister in relation to this application and makes it illegal to grant this application, but also importantly, it rules out that it can never be approved again in the future. Because it's one thing under political pressure now to say no to Advent Energy in this particular application. We don't want a situation where this area of ocean is opened up again in 2 years' time for another permit. So I think it's very important that we rule this out once and for all, and that's what the PEP11 bill seeks to do. Now, I know some people have said, oh, look, like Labor have said this is not the way to do it. I have legal advice that this is the way to do it, and so anyone giving, you know, a pretty feeble excuse of saying this isn't the best way to do it, I would call on them to show their legal advice to that effect.
Unreal, Zali, and we're getting a lot of love for you and your bill on the chat line, which is amazing. I love to see it. Why, you know, you're talking about this bill, it's really going to, well, hopefully stop gas in perpetuity, so it's not going to be on the coastline. But in the overall scheme of things, why is this bill really necessary?
Well, I think it's necessary because too often we get a lot of lip service from politicians, and ironically I am now a politician, but I mostly think of myself as just a Northern Beaches girl. You get too much talk and not enough action, you know, especially around climate change and around our emissions reduction. A lot of MPs talk a big game. They talk about supporting the need to transition, but they don't do anything when it comes to a vote. And too often I've been in the parliament and we've had opportunities to vote against expanding gas, for example, and they vote in favour. So, for example, recently we had, I tried to stop with a amendment to legislation, $50 million of public money going to gas companies to explore and open up the Beetaloo Basin. And ironically, both Coalition MPs and Labor MPs supported it. They voted for public money to pay to go and frack for gas the Beetaloo Basin. Now, so whilst those individual MPs will go home to their communities and they'll say, yes, we understand climate change, and yes, we need to transition away from fossil fuels. At the end of the day, when they get to Parliament, their vote becomes a proxy vote to the party room, to the caucus, and they just all follow the line. And I think communities really need to be aware of that and hold them to account for that. So this bill forces everyone to put their vote where their opinions are, and really be on the record and then answerable to their communities.
That's fantastic. I love that. Everything in your ethos is everything that you do. You embody it all, and it's so positive for not only the local community of the Northern Beaches, but for everyone, Australia and worldwide. So thank you very much for all the hard work that you do. It's incredible. Robbie Newman from Living Ocean, I want to throw over to you. You know, what will PEP11 do to our ocean environment? You have researched so much of this coastline over a few decades. Let us know what's going on.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can, sure can.
Okay. I'd just like to get onto it, a little bit of a rant first. I'd like to acknowledge Willa Mehring, who was a Garigal tribe member up here on the Northern Beaches. That means clever man, who 230 years ago on September the 7th, 1790, expressed his displeasure to Governor Phillip for colonialists moving in without asking and starting to destroy the land. Since then, we have deforested 50% of this great southern land. So, okay, so now we're moving on to the ocean. I mean, that's what we've done in 300 years or 200. So I'll just read the press release quote, because that basically summarises what we're on about. The PEP11 zone cuts across the ocean's major marine life transit lanes and would compromise the recovery of both the humpback, the rare southern right whales, and other species. Both of these species are a major asset to national and global economies as both climate regulators and as a regional tourism asset. The oceans must remain as they were and always should be the cradle of life for the planet. So, okay, so Living Ocean has been surveying cetaceans in the PEP11 zone since 2004. We have collected a global leading data set for whale behaviour and migration tracks, unlike anything else on the planet. We are now part of the Southern Hemisphere Whales and Climate Change Alliance with Griffith University on the Gold Coast. Basically, we're a citizen science group. Currently, there are an estimated 29,000 humpback whales off our east coast. They are fast breeders. Southern right whales are currently estimated at 270. They're very slow breeders. Unfortunately, the right whale was the right whale to kill. So they were easy targets and they gave off a lot of oil. So that's the irony. We're after them for their oil, and then as a result of that, we destroyed that, and now we're after oil and gas that's in the earth, and that's killing us. That's destroying the planet as well. We're very good at destroying the planet, the place we live on. As Jimi Hendrix would say, we're burning down the house. All of these species, plus dolphins and others, would be cut off in the PEP11 zone for this great southern migration, which is up the east coast of Australia. In 2016, we halted a 2D seismic test by the leaseholders of PEP11, a test scheduled in the middle of the southern whale migration period. The operators, who are actually the same people who are still in control of the lease and trying to get back into it, their manual and their environmental impact statement had no idea at all about any of this, any of the species they were tracking, or they had no sufficient plan to monitor or report about any of the impacts during or after the seismic survey. So as a result of us lodging against them with what was NOPSEMA back then, they were put off for a year. So during that year also, they were involved in an internal squabble amongst themselves. So we gained a few years of pardon from them because of their activities. Any PEP11 industrial estate across this migration route will drive species offshore. Now, both the southern rights and the humpback whales in their northern and southern migration paths track very close to the coast, okay? Particularly when they've got young. So if they go wider, they get picked off by predators, there's ship strikes. It's insanity. So there you go. So whales, what are they? Whales are a positive species. Economically, we based everything that we do on whales, okay? Because we think whales are very important. Whales and trees are the most two important entities for the rebalancing of the earth, the climate. They're very good climate regulators. So, I mean, whales have been here for 50 million years. We've only been here for 300 years and we're stuffing up the place already. So, okay, so whales are nature's solution to climate change. You couldn't invent a better climate regulator besides trees than whales. Trees and whales are our two main climate regulators. So I'm just reading this off because I could never remember it. The trouble is there's so much data. Anyway, okay, so a whale, it was valued, a single whale has just recently been valued by the IMF as worth $2 million for its carbon capture. Now, most likely, that's been revised up to $6 million per whale at current carbon valuation prices, along with global tourism. So if there's 29,000 whales currently travelling along the east coast of Australia, valued at $6 million, that is a $174 million asset just swimming right through the PEP11 zone. $174 million asset, and it's a positive asset. Whales actually absorb carbon and they help the phytoplankton down in the southern oceans also generate oxygen. So these are incredibly valuable assets. And when a whale dies, it releases approximately 33 tonnes of CO2 back into the system, down in the ocean, not up in the air. And one whale captures the equivalent of 2,000 trees. It goes on and on. And then we're just trying to acknowledge what here's one of the ironies of one of the things we investigated. I'm sorry, but we're based on science, so there's just facts. I'm just trying to throw facts into the soup mix. Basically, whale watching is a very important. We've just been trying to figure out how much whale watching is worth to the coastline. Now, because it's unregulated, it's very hard to get an exact figure on this. But, however, basically, whale watching is largely unregulated. It's made up of big and boutique operators. The largest group is, ironically, in Hervey Bay, and that is Keith Pitt's electorate. So, and there's 13 listed operators. So, how would Keith and his voters feel about a PEP zone with seismic surveys and gas fields in Hinkler? Anyway, there's more.
Thank you, Robbie. you Living Ocean have done some amazing work on cetacean studies, especially from a citizen science point of view. And it's so interesting to know that whales, are a part of our climate solution, and they are coming, that's their whale superhighway right through that PEP11 zone. So we need to protect their homes as much as we need to protect it for ourselves as well. And by protecting the whales, we'll be protecting our future. So thank you so much for all of the hard work you do. Lots of great facts there. Lane, I will throw over to you. You have had experiences overseas surfing in places, as you mentioned before, with offshore petroleum drilling. What does that really do to a place?
It destroys it. I mean, it's a disgusting thing to look at for a start, and there's no guarantees that they can prevent oil spills. And then what about when they decommission the rig? Then what? So it has a trickle down effect, and it's something that we need. I just think we've just been too short-sighted especially from our federal government's point of view. I mean, I still can't get rid of that image of ScoMo walking in with a piece of coal saying, "Don't be afraid, it's just coal." I mean, literally, we only have about 10 years to solve this issue. And net emissions is something that we must work towards if we want to maintain our existence. And, thinking about carbon storage and hearing Robbie's statistics around the deforestation, and then look, there's so many things that we're doing to destroying us, not realizing. I don't think the big corporates actually realize that our oceans and our forests basically give us the oxygen that we need to breathe. And if we continue to destroy that, then we're just going to suffocate and die. So, I mean, that's the extreme elements. Don't let me be a naysayer, but that's exactly what we're doing. So yeah, just the consideration that we're still thinking of allowing these permits to operate is short-sighted. It prevents us from investing in renewable technologies. There's plenty of technologies out there that we could start transferring our country towards. We have the resources, we have the capacity, we just don't have the appetite within our leadership, and it's going to be our voices and our feet that are going to establish that appetite, and we have to be loud and proud about it.
Absolutely, and it's lucky we've got all of these people with a huge appetite to stop this from happening. Bruce, we've got a few questions for yourself, and one of those questions was, what is motivating the government's gas-led recovery?
Well, I've been asked this a few times, and I think it's pretty simple, really. It's just corruption. It's corruption of the political process. And by that I mean money getting involved in politics. There are large donations from the oil and gas industry to politicians, both Labor and Liberal. And then there are the revolving doors where you have senior ministers then going on to have lobbying roles with the oil and gas industry. The best example of this actually is Martin Ferguson, who was a former Labor former Labor Minister for Resources, who went on to be a lobbyist for APPIA, which is the peak body of the oil and gas industry. So this is a corruption of process. Corruption is becoming far worse in Australian society generally, particularly from the oil and gas industry. It's very marked and very real, and it's something we should all rail against. I don't think it's acceptable. I really don't. You know, the trouble is it exists on both sides of politics. You know, the Labor and the Liberal Party are equally corrupted when it comes to this type of decision making.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to throw back over to Zali. We've had a few questions for you, Zali. I'm going to start with this one. Why does Keith Pitt have more power than Scott Morrison, who apparently opposes PEP11? People are worried that PEP11 will be a part of the horse trading that goes on between the PM and Barnaby around committing to reach net zero emissions when it comes time for Morrison to face the world at the UN climate conference in November. So why does Keith Pitt have more power than ScoMo?
Well, essentially, he is appointed by Scott Morrison as the minister for that portfolio. So in a sense, he's only in that role because Scott Morrison put him there. So Scott Morrison does ultimately have power that if he as a minister is not conducting or making the right decisions, that he can be removed from that portfolio. He is a national though, so we know there is a secret agreement between the Liberals and the Nationals as to how many ministerial spots they have and which portfolios they want to hold. So part of the secret negotiations that goes on between Liberals and Nationals when they form government, form a coalition government, is that they do this kind of trading and this the arrangements. So he has been put in place as a minister, and it is that portfolio that has the decision-making power in relation to these applications. So I would argue Scott Morrison as Prime Minister, he leads a coalition government, he should have the power to really direct Keith Pitt or request his removal, but he is a national and we know there is negotiations going on. There's no doubt there's horse trading going on between the Liberals and the Nationals, especially with the return of Barnaby Joyce as leader. And he makes, he makes no secret about it. I've met with him to discuss the climate change bill and our climate policy. Barnaby is all about what's in it for me. And what's in it for my community, even though, ironically, his community is at the heart, in New England, at the heart of Matt Keane, New South Wales government's renewable energy zones. They're getting a huge amount of investment for that transition, but yet Barnaby will still take the view of, well, what's in it for me? I think because the Nationals federally are really no longer the party for rural and regional and farmers. They are really the fossil fuel and the mining party, and they do that at all costs. So yes, there is a fear that the reason why Keith Pitt has not ruled out PEP11 is because this is part of their horse trade, and it's a little bit of a you can't tell me what to do. I'm in Queensland, but I'm going to ruin your coast down there. So I think there's a bit of a power play going on, and they are completely oblivious to the impact of future generations. I mean, Keith Pitt has gone on the record saying he doesn't really care what happens in 30 years' time. He's just focusing on now. So incredibly short-sightedness. And if I could touch on, we recently in our last session of Parliament had to pass a bill to impose a levy which was for the decommissioning of oil and gas rigs. So what happens is these rigs get put up, companies make their profits, they go off, and when they get to the end of their life, they often put these rigs into companies that have no assets that go into administration, and the taxpayer is left with the cleanup bill of decommissioning these rigs. And to give you an idea, at the moment we have about 160 decommissioned oil and gas rigs waiting to be dealt with, and more often than not they just sink into the bottom of the ocean. But by 2026 it's expected there's going to be 440 old oil and gas rigs. So can you imagine, not only are we just creating a mess for future generations from emissions, from methane and everything, but on top of that, it is generally the public and the taxpayer that are left to pick up the bill to clean up the mess and get rid of the rigs in the ocean. So there are so many layers of wrong about this that really it's so important for people to speak up.
That is absolutely crazy. I had no idea that they weren't, you know, it's not imperative for them to decommission their own rigs, and how many there are out in our oceans that are there and they're just sitting there waiting to be decommissioned. That is absolutely crazy. I'm going to throw over to Bruce. An element of the PEP11 application to drill is also to assess its suitability for carbon capture and storage. Can you please explain to the audience why this is such an inappropriate idea economically and ecologically?
Okay, let's kick off with the economic side of it. Billions of dollars have been spent globally on carbon capture and storage, and it's one of the few technologies where billions of dollars have been spent on it and there's very little result. Gorgon, which is the only operating carbon capture and storage project in Australia, off the west coast of Australia. It's a big LNG plant on Barrow Island off the west coast of Australia. It really hasn't operated very successfully. It was years late in commissioning, then they had numerous technical problems with it, and even today it's not operating at capacity. So that project was approved on the basis that they would start the carbon capture and storage project at the same time as the gas wells, and that simply didn't occur. And ever since, it really hasn't worked. If we have a look at Santos, they're looking at doing one out at Moomba. It's only going to capture up to, the words they use are up to 50% of the carbon dioxide that's actually pushed underground there. And there are basically 4 mechanisms by which the carbon dioxide is stored, and they have various levels of efficacy. In other words, they're not all 100% you're going to capture the carbon. Santos are using it for enhanced oil recovery. The reason they're doing it is because they can get more oil and gas out of the fields. That's why they're doing the carbon capture section of it. So essentially it doesn't work. I mean, this is the basic point with carbon and capture and storage is it doesn't work. And the risks are enormous. The risks are enormous. And the reason why they're enormous is if you have a look in Moomba, for example, there are 2,500 wells in Moomba over the years that have been drilled into Moomba. Moomba is in the northern part of South Australia, in the desert there. 2,500 wells have been punctured into that land. Now, each one of those is a potential failure point for a carbon capture and storage project, right? Each one of those can fail. They're only down there like this little sleeve of steel and with cement poured into it to plug it when you've finished drilling for oil and gas. The earth moves every now and again, periodic earthquakes. You know, the cement cracks, it gets eroded away by the harsh environment it's in down there, you know, down underground. It's got to contend with salt water and dilute hydrochloric acid, both of which eat it away. And over time, they fail. And so what you're doing with carbon capture and storage is actually setting up a series of carbon bombs to go off in the future and re-release that carbon dioxide. That's what you're doing. And it's not a long-term solution. It's a short-term fix that doesn't work.
Right. Okay, well, you heard it there, folks. Bruce is telling us not a solution at all. I'm going to throw over finally to Damian. And Damo, what did you learn from the Fight for the Bike campaign that is relevant to this PEP11? Is it all about community and our voices?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think as we've just kind of heard from a number of people here today, that there are a lot of powers to be which aren't necessarily always in the best interest of our communities. But one thing that we can rely on, that we should rely on, is each other and our communities, and that we need to get active. And I think Brendan kind of touched on this a bit earlier in saying that, you know, this is not just a participation, you know, it's not a spectator sport. You need to get involved. And we're at a point, as Lane mentioned, we've only got a number of years left. The IPCC report came out that really, it was quite scary, you know, and I know that there's a lot of people that it's overwhelming and it can be quite daunting. And I think the best way to kind of counter that is to get active and to join the likes of Surfrider Foundation, to join the likes of Save Our Coast, to get active in your political kind of world. And I think that really is just where what we've seen and what we saw in the successful Fight for the Bite is that's what that was. It was the beautiful thing about it was that it was power of the people, and it was essentially nobody's campaign but everybody's campaign, because everyone felt like they were part of beating Equinor and actually protecting the Great Australian Bight. And I think that this is what we need to do right here. And again, you know, thank you to Zali for putting up this bill and actually putting this on the table for Parliament and actually getting a decision made for this. And just want to reiterate as well that we've got a petition right here that we've just launched, and I think that's our number one right now, to get as many people as possible to sign that. So for all of you sitting there listening, if you're kind of thinking, okay, how can I help? Your first step is head over to surfrider.org.au and sign the petition, and then share it with friends. It's really an important thing for us to get. We're looking to hopefully get 100,000 signatures in the near future, and to really put the pressure on every single MP around the country to show them that we won't stand for this any longer, and that we will stand up and protect our coastline, because it's our home. It's what we rely on for everything, from surfing to our social well-being, our mental health, to the very oxygen we breathe. And without this, then we've got nothing. And for me, this is what I do here. You might have Keith Pitt saying that he doesn't care about the next 30 years. Well, you know, I still haven't been fortunate enough to have kids, but I damn well want them. And I would love them to live and be able to, you know, take them surfing in an ocean that is free from these destructive practices, and get to enjoy what we've all been so fortunate to enjoy. So that to me is just the biggest takeaway, is to get active, you know, sign the petitions, join our cause, join our movement, because this is what actually, if you're feeling overwhelmed, I tell you what, it's a great release. When you feel like you're making a positive change, that's a really important part of what we do. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you, Damo. I think you've said it perfectly. You know, everyone needs to get on board. We want you to sign the petition. So jump over onto surfrider.org.au to sign the petition. Share it around on social media. Share it to your friends. We need everyone's voices to really make a difference. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today: Michael Regan, Zali Stegel, Robbie Newman, Lane Beachley, Bruce, Damo, Kristen and Brendan. Thank you all so much for your time, and thank you for everyone for dialing in and listening today. We need you and your voices and your influence for good. So get on to signing that petition. All our recordings will be up online, so you can share those with your networks too. And together we can all stop PEP11. Thanks.